Hey, hello, Cyndy here today. I have this thing running through my mind. I always have a lot of things running through my mind. I've been remembering about one of the experiences of my life and how I first came to really trust the Lord and find Him in the midst of my worst things, and how that has impacted a lot of how I've actually come to understand God and how I walk with God today. I was in the midst of a 12-step recovery program way back called Freedom Session that we had at our church, at the church I was attending at the time. I had been working through a lot of things. Lots of things had kind of gone wrong for me in my life. There had been emotional abuse, psychological abuse, rape, experience alongside drug and alcohol, and with a primary person in my life. There had been a period of time when I was starving myself so my kids could eat, just some real traumatic stuff. And I was in process of working through these things and really sort of at the edge of really diving in and finding freedom. But I remember at the time that the pain that I had around all of these things seemed so vast to me that if I was to enter into that pain, I would never get out, is how it felt to me at the time. It occurred to me in my mind's eye like this witch's cauldron, right? Like a great big pot of black, ugly stew. And again, if I entered into that, I wouldn't be able to get out. And so I was afraid, of course, of opening these trunks and the doors to these closets and to these times and experiences. I wasn't sure what I would find, and I wasn't sure who I would be or what the result would be. So I was pretty afraid, terrified. But I was in the midst of this process with the Lord, and one day God gave me this image, this ginormous pile of shit. Great big pile of horse poo or cow manure. You know, I grew up near horse barns when I was young, and so when the stalls would be cleaned of the horse poo every day, there would end up in the farmyard somewhere a ginormous pile of horse poo. So this was the image that God was giving me, was this giant pile of crap, which symbolized a bit of the story of my life. All these things that had gone bad and wrong, that should have never been a part of my journey. Things that God never intended for me. But in this picture, this image of this giant pile of horse poo, there was Jesus in the middle of it, standing in it. It's up to his chest, and he's saying to me, "Well, Cyndy, I'm already here. I'm already in the midst of the worst things done to you. I've come before you, and I've made a way through everything that's been terrible. So would you join me? Would you come with me? Let's explore this together, because I'm going to bring healing, and I'm going to make it okay." But of course, I had to trust him with that, right? And really, it was just that image of Jesus chest deep in a pile of shit that compelled me to enter in and to begin to, with the help of others, begin to unpack these really ugly, dark experiences and parts of my life. And trusting that God would, again, God was already there in the midst of the worst things and in my darkness. And so I entered in, and I don't even remember exactly what the next thing was I did. I just know I took courage and I began to walk into these things, to journal them, to speak them out loud with counselors, to process it through with this 12-step recovery program, and just with inner healing prayer as well, to begin to find God in the midst of the worst things of my life. And oh my goodness, so much amazing bounty and life and healing and restoration and joy and ability. And so what had seemed to me like this giant cauldron, a witch's cauldron of black, ugly stuff, of so much pain that if I got in, I would never get out. What turned out is that this cauldron has become a reservoir that the worst things have turned into this process of living water. And now I get to dip out this living water for people all over the world. And so what has been my darkness, God has turned into bounty and to blessing. And what has been the worst experiences of my life have in turn become the authority of my life. They are the places where I can say, God met me here. I've known sexual abuse. I've known starving myself so my kids can eat. I have known not being able to clothe my children and waiting on others to give gifts of clothing so that they could grow into the next season. I've known what it is to be in a difficult marriage. I've known what it is to be in abuse. I know what it is to be mocked and ridiculed. And I know what it is to be deprived and manipulated. And God was in all of this with me and has brought me through and met me in those places, was with me all those times. And these things that evil meant for destruction, oh my goodness, is being multiplied out unto good and unto blessing for so many other people. And where my life was broken, it's become an agent of healing for many, many others. And it's been an amazing journey. So one of the ways that I wrote about this or tried to summarize it, I've written a one-year course for pastors and lay leaders. And in one of the chapters, about halfway through the course, in fact, as I went to find the image, I was surprised. It's like smack dab in the middle of this course is a chapter that I called The Chasm. And I'd grown up in church, and there was always this image that we have, God's over here on the one side, we're over here, and in the middle there's this giant chasm. And then we get this picture of a cross laid down over it, right? And Jesus, dying on the cross, and he's the one, and so because of him, and of course because of him, we can walk across his life and we can find God. But I wasn't satisfied with this image, because after this journey of inner healing and of opening the heart, the rooms in my heart, and finding God's light and freshness and healing and restoration, I recognize that this image of God on one side of the chasm and us on the other side of the chasm, and Jesus just helps us cross the way, didn't deal with what was in the chasm. And so I thought, of course, about this for quite some time and was praying about it. And I thought, it's just not the right image. Like, what happens to the stuff in the chasm, the stuff we don't want to look at, the stuff we won't go to, right? Our own hell, so to speak, the pit of our own lives, the darkness within our own hearts, and the experiences that have been put upon us by others, but then like how we respond out of kind and often not in good ways. That's a big part of our own hell, is these responses of hatred and these responses of damnation unto each other, right? That was also part of my journey when I realized that I need help, because I was so agreeing to the battering in my life that I was becoming exceptionally ugly from the inside out. So what do we do with this chasm here? And I realized that really, at least in my experience, and actually I think this is theologically correct, that cross of Jesus Christ is actually planted in my chasm, in the pit of my life. Just like that image of Jesus in the pile of shit. That's where the cross is. And Jesus is saying, I'm already here. Like, come, because this is where we're going to really do some relationship, and you're going to find that this isn't as bad as you thought, even though it's terrible. These things are never meant to be part of your life, but I have overcome, and you can find me in the worst places of your life. And so I had done this image. I'm not sure if it's going to come up. So here's God and us and the cross across, and I don't think that's the right image. And then there's this God and us on either side, but Jesus is the one who takes on our darkness, who takes on the pit, who takes on evil, who takes on sin, absorbs it into himself, and puts it to death in hell. And it's no more. He overcomes sin and death. And that then in that pit we're invited, right? We're invited there. And then in fact, as we meet God there, we find this wedding feast of the Lamb, and we find sulha, we find peace and reconciliation with ourselves, with our own journey. We don't have to keep sort of fighting and railing against what's gone wrong. It can sort of be just, it's been opened up, it's been unpacked. We've looked it in the face, and we find it's not as scary as we think it is. And we can put it aside, so to speak. We can go on. The sins, we're no longer bound to our own sin, and we are no longer bound to the sins done against us. We don't have to stay there anymore. So we're reconciled to our own journeys, and we realize that God's always been for us. God is for you, and He's for me, and He's with us. He's been there all along. And then we're reconciled potentially in tangible and intangible ways, even with those who've hurt us most. We find that forgiveness releases it off, and we can walk free, right? And this wedding feast of the Lamb happens in the midst of the worst things, and there's a bounty there, and there's intimacy, and there's freedom, and there's wholeness, and there's healing. And so we don't want to bypass the worst parts of our lives, because actually that's where God is. He says, find me in the worst things, and we're going to make this stuff into your testimony and into the strength of your life and into the reality of God in us that nobody can take away. One of my daughters said to me last week, she asked me, Mom, why are you so happy? And my immediate response is, whenever somebody says something like this, is, well, you know, I've been through a lot of terrible stuff, and I'm not afraid of anything anymore. Like, I face the worst things within myself, either from me or from others to me, and it's okay, because God's with me, and God is my healer, and my savior, and my lover, and my friend, and the one who makes me new and gives me joy. And it's okay, even though so much is not okay. Literally, so much is not okay. But it's okay, because we can come to peace even in the midst of what's not okay. And then once we have found that for ourselves, we live it for everybody else. There's a confidence that we carry that can be spread to others. God is for you. God can heal you. God loves you. He sings over you. Delights in you. It's for you. This isn't something I've read in a book. It's something I've lived and something I know. And now I have authority to say that based on the power of God in me. And the same thing is for you. Where is the power of God in you? Because once you find that, nothing can take it away. There is nothing that can touch the confidence of God in us. So that chasm thing, don't just bypass it, right? Invite God into it. God, come into my darkness. Like all these things that have been against me and the places where I've even been against my own life, come here. I want to meet with you here. And God, give me courage to come into that place. Give me courage to meet you in the hardest things. And then just enjoy. Allow God to do what God does. Touches us, renews us, restores us. Gives us a kiss on the cheek, wraps us in an embrace, challenges us as well. You know, Cyndy, you might have to look at this thing here. And we go, okay, I'll look at that thing there. And then with this, just this holy fear that can barely take in the beauty of God, we stand in wonder, and we stand in awe, and we stand in love. And we're different people. So, I don't know what your chasm has in it. I don't know what your darkness might be named. But God's already there. Go find Him there. Take a risk. Take courage. Bless you. Bless you today.